we evolve, because it's what we can do. It's what we should do. Today, tomorrow, forever.
Well, a little over 8 years ago, I helped start Hands for Others. And in the past 8 years, I've been a part of growing Hands for Others into one of the largest organizations engaging students in advocacy work really in the world. And through that, I've had the unique opportunity to connect and work alongside literally thousands of students. And I've been able to learn a lot of things from that. And one of them is that every student has a distinct vision for what they believe their communities and the world at large should look like. And the funny thing about this is that every student has these strong ideas about what their community and the world should look like, and then they get these ideas of what should be different about their communities and what ought to change in the world. And those are often accompanied by what I like to call strong opinions about those ideas and those changes. What makes it really fun. And one of the things that I've been able to witness firsthand about these students who care about changing their communities in the world is that they really, really deeply care. And whether it's regarding civil rights in our country, or an issue in their community such as homelessness, or a global challenge such as the world's water crisis, they really care about making an impact. And yet at the same time, despite all these great dreams and these great ambitions, so few of them are actually able to take those ideas, put them into action, and start movements to begin to address the changes that they want to see made in their communities around the world. And so I've sort of been obsessed with this question for the past 8 years, which is, how is it that ideas evolve into movements? Why is it that so many young people who have a desire to change the world, why is it only that just a few of them are able to take those ideas and those passions and to make a difference? And the thing is I believe that everyone wants to make a difference, but why is it that only a small percentage is actually doing so? Well, I have some thoughts on this question. Before I get there, I want to make sure we're on the same page here. As I'm bringing up a word like movements, I want to make sure that we are on the same page. And so, what is a movement? Well, a movement is a group of people making. Okay, so not thinking, not dreaming, not hoping, not waiting, but making a change. So when we think of movements, we may think of Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement, acting on the idea that everyone's equal, regardless of the color of their skin. We may think of a business such as Tom's Shoes, acting on the idea that businesses at a fundamental level can exist to do good. We may think of a local organization or soup kitchen that's feeding the hungry, acting on the idea that everyone in our communities deserves a hot meal. Personally, I think of Hands for Others, and that's acting on the idea that young people are capable of making a difference in the world if they're given a chance to. So what can we learn from these movements? What have I learned from the students that I've been able to work alongside of? Well, I've come up with what I'd say are 3 qualities that I believe any person needs to embody if they're going to take his or her ideas and put them into action and start a movement of their own. And I call them the 3 Ps of idea actualization. And the first is passion. You have to be passionate if you want to start a movement. Now, the best way to really quantify passion, I think, is by questions. Asking somebody, how badly do you care about your ideas? How much do you want to make those changes that you believe in happen in your community or around the world? Do you ever lose sleep over them? Do you wake up every day feeling motivated to do something about these ideas that you have? Is there ever a point that you're just sitting around and you feel overwhelmed by the thought that you want to make a difference and that you want to impact a certain group of people? And the reason why passion is so important is because it is essentially a tipping point for action. When you care so deeply about something, when you want so badly to make a difference and to change certain people's lives, the only logical response is to do something about it. And if you're truly passionate about it, you're going to persevere. Yeah, some speed bumps might come up, there might be some hurdles in your way, but if you care deeply about it, you're going to overcome those, because nothing or no one is going to stand in your way of the change that you are looking to make. The second P of idea actualization is persistence. Now, the reality is it takes hard work to build a movement, because you are essentially going against the present reality. It's a lot like walking uphill versus walking downhill. You know, when you're walking uphill, you have this thing called gravity, which makes it a little bit harder to do so. Well, people who start movements feel this sort of gravity in a sense as well. When they realize, wow, it's hard to do what I'm trying to do. And they quickly realize that it takes a lot of work, and it's hard work, and it's draining work. And so I like to call this the iceberg principle, where if you look at an iceberg, the top 10%, the stuff that's above water that you can actually see, is only 10% of an iceberg. And it's held up by the 90% underneath the water that keeps it afloat and keeps it intact. Well, movements are really not all that different. You have your top 10% there, which is what people can see, which is all the exciting stuff, the big ideas, the glamorous vision, the incredible change that you're making in your community or around the world. And yet, all of that can only be sustained and held up if you have that foundation built. And the foundation is things like hard work, late nights, a lot of coffee meetings, a lot of rejection along the way, people telling you, I don't know if this will work, and dealing with that. It looks like doing a lot of very boring, repetitive tasks over and over and over again because you have to. And it looks like messing up occasionally and having to learn from those mistakes and failures and address them and get back up and keep going. You see, there's no shortcut to movement building. There's no growth hack. This foundation has to be built. And if this step is skipped, or if you avoid it, well, that top 10%, the thing that people see, it's not going to float for long, or it's going to melt pretty quick. So the last P of idea actualization is patience. You have to be patient to build a movement. A lot of the students that I get to work with, they all have some incredible ideas for nonprofits, for businesses, for social enterprises. And so they like to ask me a lot, hey, what do you think about this idea? But before they begin, I always say, hey, wait 1 second, I have a question for you. And the question I ask them, before you tell me this idea, I want to know right now, is this something that you are willing to spend the next 5 to 10 years of your life on? Because that's what it may take. If you really want to do this, if you want to solve this problem, if you want to create this change, build this movement, that's what it can take. And so the reality is that it really only takes an instant to create a movement and to create a lot of excitement and a lot of energy behind something. But it takes a lot of time to build an organization of sustainable greatness and sustainable change. I mentioned Martin Luther King Jr. earlier, and the reality that many people overlook is that he started his work in civil rights in the early 1950s, but it wasn't until 1964 that the Civil Rights Act was actually passed. And of course, it's been an uphill battle ever since then. So it takes time to build a movement. Real change is hard work, and it requires you to be patient. So here's the thing. Everyone has ideas. Everyone has a thought on what they believe their community and what the world should look like. And that's a great thing. It's important that we hold on to those ideas, because that's the only way that we ever can create change, is by having ideas of what should be different. But the sad fact is that not a lot of people act on their ideas. And it's because of sort of what we talked about here, is that it's hard work, and there's a lot of it, and it's emotionally draining work, and it's not easy. But here's the other thing, that you have the opportunity to not be most people, so to speak. You can take those dreams you have, those ideas you have, the vision you have for your community and for the world, and you can put it into action right now. You can make it happen. Who says that you can't be the next great civil rights leader of our generation? Who says that you can't start a movement that ends homelessness in your community? Who says that you can't start a global movement that ends human trafficking? You see, I've worked with a few college students who literally barely were able to graduate college because they had a hard time in their classes. And I've kept in touch with a few of those students, and some of them are doing incredible work in their communities and around the world. Conversely, I've worked with some students, college students, that were straight A students, way smarter than me, and they got out and tried to start their own movements and didn't end up working because maybe they weren't patient enough or persistent enough. And so I bring that up not to say that grades don't matter, because they do, but I bring it up because this whole thing of movement building, it's not about how smart you are, it's not about where you're from, it's not about who your parents are, how much money you have, it's not about whether you've been perceived your whole life as a leader or whether you've been ignored so you feel by everyone. That's not the point. That doesn't matter. What matters is how much you care. What matters is, are you willing to roll up your sleeves and do the hard work that most people are unwilling to do? What matters is, are you willing to persevere and keep at it when most people around you have given up? So the next time you get that big idea, or you have this urge in your heart to create some type of change in your community or the world, I encourage you to remember that it's right here, that it's at your fingertips, and that if you are passionate, if you are persistent, and if you are patient, you can build movements that change your communities and change the world. I believe in you, and I believe that we, as a generation, can be known not only for our big ideas and for our idealism, but for our activism and for the great things that we're doing in our communities and around the world. Thank you.